This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, this honorable chamber was debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We revert to the Appropriation Bill 2026.
This House is now in standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you, Minister and team. It's good to see some familiar faces sitting in the well. This ministry has a special place in my heart. It's the first ministry that I would have had the honor to serve in. And I know that this is a very dedicated and hardworking team. And I must say that I'm pleased to see that there has been a significant jump in the amount of investment that has been made into this ministry. It's a very critical ministry. It has a very important role to play in the entire architecture of the Barbados that we're seeking to build. When I took over the ministry, or was given responsibility for the ministry, we had a budget of about $40 million. So to see you now at 80 something million, I am happy to see that the government has acceded to making this significant investment. I want to bring the conversation to the first part of the responsibilities in which the name of the ministry speaks to, industry. We've had conversations that kind of skirted around it throughout the course of this morning's dialogue. We talked about industrialization, we talked about Industry 5.0, we talked about, some of those things. And I really wanted to bring this back to a very grassroots level. Your ministry has responsibility for the development of industry, setting policies that would enable an environment to be created that allows for industry to take place. And when I think of industry, I think of our agro-processors, I think of our food, the persons who are in the food space, the persons who are making the sauces and the condiments and different things like that. I had the privilege when I was in the ministry of being the minister that led to the creation of the International Food Science Center. So I know the impact of what a vehicle like that would have had. And I hope that in the response to this first question, it's really one question, Mr. Chair. I hope that in the response to this one question, that we will be able to hear some statistics even on the impact and the output that has come from the International Food Science Center, because we've mentioned it in passing today, but it would be good to actually have some statistics to show what the impact has been over the few years that it has been in existence. But I want, Minister, for you to speak to the overarching policy for supporting industry and its development in our country. What is the overarching policy, the ethos that you are pursuing to develop industry at the level of grassroots? The not nail tech necessarily, but the food producer within my constituency in St. Michael North, the guy who sells me my natural juices in Grisettes. I want to be able to hear from you, what is the ethos that is guiding the ministry relative to industry in its development? And even as I put that out there, if you could also, in speaking to policy and ethos, if you could speak to the Sustainable Industrial Development Policy. This was a policy that when I first came into cabinet, I was tasked with the responsibility of driving this policy and getting it into cabinet. We did that, and it was sent off to CPC for the drafting of the Sustainable Industrial Development Bill to become Act. Unfortunately, I've not heard much since then. So if you could probably put it in the context of the Sustainable Industrial Development Policy that we had or have, that would also give, I think, some benefit to the listeners and the people of Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I will say that I couldn't imagine doing this job with the $40 million budget, so kudos to you for doing what you did with that. And so I'll CEO of BIDC will obviously will add after I do, but I'll go wider to them to go narrow, quite frankly, is What we recognized at the point in time of taking up the role within the ministry, and we had the privilege of doing some study tours specifically to Singapore, and looking at, despite the high level of technology importance to the economy, digital economy's importance to the economy, science, its importance to the economy, that by law, the Parliament has set a minimum floor of industry being over 20% of the overall gross domestic product. That because that so much of a small island state's capacity to be resilient is based on what it's able to make for itself and export from itself to other places, that by law, you had to adjust the budgets and the production capacity of the country to not be under a certain floor. And this was exciting. This was new to me, quite frankly. And so we spent a lot of time thinking that through and what that would represent for Barbados. People who in here know better than I do that Barbados obviously had a significant investment in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, building out an industrial infrastructure, largely around large spaces and inviting global entities to make things from Barbados. One standout entity of that such, of course, is Intel, which of course is now the location for the popular Sheraton Mall. And the idea that from Barbados, you had high-value technical products being made from Barbados, being shipped out from Barbados, is the kind of business, of course, that we want to get back towards. Now, fundamental to all of that is then a society which is in the business of making things. And I think, and I'll be strong in my words, I think we have drifted away from being makers of products that are valuable to becoming consumers of products that we value. Right, that we look to other markets to create things for us that we consume, as opposed to how much do we value the idea of creating things for ourselves that we enjoy and make for ourselves and then can sell to others. Economies of scales also matter, because my ability to create something that is of high quality or cheap or be able to deliver is directly related to my quality of service, my quality of technologies, my quality of products and inputs and the prices of those things. And so for small places, you're always going to have that balance that you're going to be building on. So our overall strategy is really based, and we spoke a little bit earlier with Deputy Prime Minister, is really based on two concurrent tracks. One, how do we encourage indigenous making of high value things, of valuable things that we consume here, that we enjoy, and a certain section of those valuable things that we consume here, make here, and enjoy can then be exported out to create revenue for the country, critically foreign exchange. Not every single thing we make in Barbados will be the point of exporting out. Not anything that's made in the United States of America or Germany or any large space is exported out. But a significant portion of it has to be to fuel in the foreign exchange we require to grow and run this economy. A certain percentage of people who are making things from Barbados have to make things for the purpose of selling it outside of Barbados. And we are driven by that, right? To the point where, well, obviously under your stewardship, there was a philosophy and name change around BIC, thinking much more about export, right? And that's a fundamental component of it. I do not think that we have done a strong enough job around that and the importance of that. And that is not to criticize any of the work that's happened previously. It's just a fundamental shift in our mindset that is necessary, that we are realistic about what we are, how we can produce, and who we must produce for to make a living. And that's the reality. Now, a portion of that making has to be things that the world wants. You need to understand what the world wants, how they want it, the price they want it, the quality they want it, what's the branding associated with, and all those types of things. So some fundamental work has to be done about what does it make sense to produce from Barbados? What sense of the price scale does it make sense from Barbados? And we have a very strong inclination that what Barbados has done very, very well is that it's had family-centered businesses, so what we call your jams and your jellies and your pepper sauces, in a colloquial manner. That's not colloquial, that's handcrafted family businesses, have done very well in the Barbados circumstances. A percentage of them have the ambition and the appetite to sell beyond Barbados. How do we identify those, support those, grow those for the purpose of shipping outside of Barbados and building industry from that? And then be tools of inspiration for other companies that want to do such. So we are fundamentally driven by that. Now, while doing that, and we spoke a lot of big business, and we're not going to shy away from big business, because as I said before, small businesses love big businesses, right? Because big businesses become small businesses' best customer, right? So how concurrent paths can we facilitate the growth of small businesses by driving more big businesses in, which will become contractors or contractees of these small businesses. So concurrent paths are required. Now, we've made a shift from, and again, the CEO of Export Barbados will go a little bit more detail. We've made a shift on how we see the government's role in facilitating the growth of small businesses away from a grant-related model around special technical assistance to an infrastructure-related model around your technology, your certification, your knowledge, your market research. How do we add value into the business in a way that's beyond the cash? We've done analysis of it, and we've seen that although very well intended and created for good reasons, the value return on the cash inputs were not as significant as we wanted them to be. So how do we provide the same amount of service, the same amount of input into business, but we allow you space in the food science center that has the machinery you need to create your jams and jellies and pepper sauces? How can we spend the money on a flight for you to get your packages and goods across the island onto the North American market or wherever you need to be for the purpose of your export? To the point of Mr. Ryan, how do we then spend money on the design you need for your packaging so that your 0.6 millimeter packaging label is done to the right specification and you don't have to worry about these things? What are the inputs that we could put in the
Honourable
businesses?
Minister, you land the plane.
Apologies. I'm excited about the topic, Chair.
I realize.
Yeah. So let me hand over to the CEO because I could go on this quite a while. Apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. So basically, it's 2 points we're looking at. We're looking at industrial policy, which is the instrumentality that government developed in order to help direct and drive reindustrialization. Pretty much where the seat is at is evolving because subsequent to the development of the CETA, technologies have emerged extremely rapidly. When the CETA was developed, we were the place where automation was the primary discussion. The instruments that we developed around strategic investment, around infrastructure, around finance, the export support that we were looking at, research and development tools, and the skills development were really centered around just Industry 4.0. Subsequent to that, AI has come on stream, which lends itself to supporting the ecosystems both for small businesses and household cottage industries in a significant way. So there's an upgrade to the CETA that is taking place. But having said that, from a reindustrialization standpoint, we start to still put in some of the key building blocks around, number one, infrastructure. So for example, the food science center as a tool that helps. At this point in time, there are over 100 small business persons that use and benefit from the International Food Science Center every day. And by persons, I don't mean just individuals, I mean households and household enterprises. So for example, the company that the Deputy Prime Minister would have mentioned, we would have sponsored the rafts that grow the sea moss. We would have imported the sea moss seeds, made sure it was planted out, and that would have happened under the Minister of Environment back in 2024. We would have supported the entire pilot to sums of infrastructural support and finance. And then to the point now we're the ones who are helping to bottle, standardize, and scale the CMC moss business. We have Carrington's Rum Cream, a family that comes in, a grandmother, a grandson, a family recipe that they're trying to protect, the brothers, the sisters, and they actually occupy the Food Science Center as a family. It's just a beautiful thing to watch. And they're doing their mixing. They don't want you to come too close because it's a family recipe. So we have those safeguards in place. And their output moved from 300 bottles of Carrington Rum Cream per week to 3,000 per day through that infrastructural investment. In other families we have, there's One Drop, the infamous One Drop pepper sauce. Again, family enterprise. A mother that controls the recipe, 2 children that have division of labor, and another uncle that comes in and provides support. Again, she's been able to scale from just doing 300 bottles, and her output now is as close to 30,000 bottles in terms of her demand. Another company that we have coming through. So what we're seeing is, as Minister pointed out, households with unique, what they would call family recipes, leveraging the center to scale their output. They're supplying Massey, they're supplying other stores, but also to their exporting as well. So what we're saying is that center of excellence model around food processing can now scale out to construction, center of excellence for construction, center of excellence for beauty science, so that the standards that are necessary are pretty much built into the ecosystem. So when you come in, you get the lab support, you get all of that infrastructure support. So the policy of centers of excellence is actually producing and bearing significant fruit as we speak. In addition to that, and the last thing is, from a supply chain standpoint, we've been able to reduce the cost of inputs for small businesses as well. So for example, food inputs, regardless of what a food processing company wants to produce, both procuring locally from local farmers, regionally and internationally, we have reduced the cost of inputs by 30% so far through that strategy, so that more small businesses can produce more and output more. So the relationship is significant. Thank you.
Excellent. That's the kind of granular detail that I was looking for, and those real world and real life stories and the results really of what the vision of the International Food Science Center is very warming to my heart. Just my last, I wasn't going to do a follow-up, but just my last question relative to industry. Are there any specific industries that you're currently focusing on for expansion? If you can give some insight into that, that'll be useful. I say that because I'm coming back to my mind relative to Sea Island cotton. And the fact that this was one of those from many, many years ago, one of those industries that we always talked about the potential of it because of the high quality it is on the world's, when we talk standards, the high quality of it across the globe. So outside of Sea Island cotton, or even as we speak about Sea Island cotton, are there any specific industries that you're currently seeking to expand and explode for the benefit of the average person in Barbados? And even as I say that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for the question. The chair has given me a look that I'm running along too long for my answer, so I'll speed through the answer. Yes, ultimately the role is to identify industries that are highly profitable and highly sustainable for Barbadians. So absolutely along the line of food production industries, but added to that, technology is an industry, right? So how do you facilitate developers of apps, software, platforms, programs to have the infrastructure required to build things and then scale on beyond our shores? A huge one of focus that is of huge import to the government, and as referenced in the manifesto in quite a number of detailed areas, is really around life sciences. Then fundamentally, how are you converting the significant number of young Barbadians who output out of the University of the West Indies every single year with biology, chemistry, biochemistry, physics degrees, but are not connected to industry to be making things and being part of a value chain of production. There are not enough scientific jobs. So how do we land and create companies that are focused on all components of science, whether it's beauty industry or whether it's large-scale biologics manufacturing? How do we make that a strong part of the infrastructure around our economy? Yes, there is a wide expanse of areas of work that we're doing that, and perhaps with the chair's permission, on another point of expansion, we could go even further in.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Hi, morning all. Good afternoon all. Minister and crew, I see in your program 043 application of information technology and your sub-program 0032 digital solutions. You would have moved from professional services, the approved estimate is 60,000, revised estimate of 3,521,000 or so, to an estimate this year, 26 to 27, of $100,000. And this program really looks at developing and deployment of solutions, including managing the integrity, protection and management of integrity, security, availability, reliability of Barbados digital assets. I'm asking the question because I think it's a question that sits on the brainstem of a lot of Barbadians. And this question is as it relates to cybersecurity. We are moving into a digital sphere, one where with the press of a button, AI can tell us how much people in the room, probably change our hairstyles, make you chair the Member of Parliament for Christchurch West Central. It can do a lot of different things that are out of our mindset. I'm saying persons who represent past the young phase, maybe in the twilight of their years, often ask about their security in terms of banking security. They see all these fancy things on the phone. There are a lot of questions. I know there's something called malware, and the people in your dimension will speak about malware. In my space, I would call it malicious software. It may be a Bayesian term too. Malicious software. And how do we treat to these things as it relates to cybersecurity? I want you to let the whole of Barbados know that the security in the digital atmosphere is one that could be protected with the right technologies, and that your ministry is doing its due diligence as it relates to ensuring that a lot of things that we see happen in the past as it relates to this same malware and other issues related to data, that these things could be solved and that their digital platform can indeed be protected. Thank you.
Chair, for you, Minister, thank you. Within your framing, there were a few things that I'll just quickly address. You started off regarding reference to the allocations within the sub-programs, and that is a reflection of evolution of the operation of the ministry, where digital solutions previously had, was where a lot of the financing for cybersecurity and digital protection budget lay. And now standing up a dedicated cybersecurity pillar within the ministry meant that we reallocated where those funds go. And if you look at the cybersecurity related budget, it is significant. Quite frankly, the Minister of Finance was, how can I be kind to my friend? The Minister of Finance was shocked by the level of expenditure it required. And I indicated in the reality is the price of defending our digital space is expensive. It is some of the most advanced services, skills, equipment in the world, and to be resilient in that space, you're going to have to pay what the cost of things are. So that is reflected in the estimates. Related to some of your other queries, I think there is and I'll let, quite frankly, and I'll beg your indulgence, Chair, because our head of cybersecurity is vastly experienced, and she's brought us from a place of deep immaturity to not where we want to be, but in a better position than we were certainly a year ago. And that's really around the mindset of resilience in a changing economy where we don't want to go back to everything being paper-based, because that's slow, that doesn't advance us where we want to be. We want to be able to have the speed and comfort of using things. That comes with advantages and disadvantages. It comes with risks. And the risk involved, like anything else, crossing the road, building a house, leaving your house in the morning, you have to manage those risks. So you don't not make decisions because you have risks. You make smart decisions and put safeguards in place so that the risk that you encounter will be well managed. That's why we have indicators, right? And that's why we slow down. That's why we have a horn, so that we can manage the process of the risk around us when we're traveling on the roads. And cybersecurity is a much exaggerated version of that risk mitigation. Now, the difficulty is that this has been a topic that's been part of our conversation for not a short period of time. As long as we've had the internet or advanced computer systems 20, 30 years ago, we've been talking about cybersecurity. But to the minister's point, the scale and the pace of the potential threats has certainly increased. With the level of threat actors that we have, with the level of AI, the level of disaggregated tools available to people all over the world, you have reached a point in time where, you know, every single day you have to be in the business of protection, just like how you have to be in the business of physical protection every single day. So what we've done is that we've created a start point that is getting more solid by the day to be able to defend Barbados's infrastructure and people's peace of mind on an individualized basis. And so I'll let Patricia Roseal, our head of cybersecurity, speak a little bit more about what we've done over the last year.
Patricia Roseal, Chief Information Security Officer. So within the last year, we would have taken a step back, look at our infrastructure, understand what our cybersecurity posture was. That led us to changing our whole focus. That focus then was centralized on working with international, worldwide partners, best-in-class, worldwide partners, best-in-class partners, to help us frame out how we are going to do this protection. From a government perspective, the cybersecurity environment posture was maturing. So we had to have a number of tactics in place simultaneously. So we have developed and we are currently rolling out what I call our perimeter protection. So we are rolling out our SIM, which is our Security Information Event Management System, which is managed by our SOC on our CCERT. And
What are those? You're using acronyms.
okay, I'll go again. Our SIM, which is our Security Information Event Management System. That system allows us to collect logs from all infrastructure components and applications within the environment. And using AI and other machine learning techniques, it helps us to determine whether or not we are exposed to threats, whether or not there are threats within our environment. And it also helps us to determine how best we deal with it in the shortest possible time. So we are rolling that out now. We have a number of ministries and SOEs on board, and we're continuing that process. We are also standing up, which is our big perimeter defense mechanism, which is our, looking for a web proxy in simple form. So what that does is control any data coming in or any data leaving our environment. And we've started a project to roll that out. Simultaneously, we are working on developing our policies and standards, because there were not sufficient standards and policies in place to guide our construction of information technology. So we're working on those standards, and we anticipate that they should be out within by the end of April. And then we would have to do an educational process across government to help people to understand the policies and standards, help them to implement them, help them to determine what are their gap analyses, help them to determine what gaps they may have from these standards. So a considerable amount of work has gone in, and we have a lot more to go, because when we looked at where we were a couple of years behind where we ought to be. And so we have to catch up and then move forward, because without a solid, mature cybersecurity posture, we will not be able to deliver on all the digital transformations that we're hoping to do, because then we will be exposing ourselves to attacks via malware or whatever, because the threat actors out there are not asleep. They're very busy. And within recent times, they have been focusing on the Latin America, Caribbean region. And they will be exploiting us. So we have to make sure that we're able to prevent what I call hygiene type attacks, basic attacks. We should be able to prevent those. We're not going to be able to prevent everything. The ones that we can't prevent, we will have to be able to detect them And once we have detected them, we must have a well-rehearsed process to defending against them. And so we are building this process. It's going to take time. Coupled with that, which is critical and important, is the competencies, the skill sets and the manpower. There is a great need for cybersecurity manpower all over the world. It's not only in Barbados. And so the skill sets and the manpower tend to be a little bit more costly, well, expensive. And so we're also working with a number of our world-renowned partners to build out this. We've had conversations with the UWI in terms of developing some courses for students there so that we can have a cadre of graduates leaving the university with some exposure and details into cybersecurity, so we will continue that. And we have two partners who are working with us on that, and hopefully shortly we will be able to start seeing students going through that cybersecurity training. Thank you.
Chair, through you, I just want to say, and not to embarrass Ms. Roseal, but part of the increased level of maturity has been largely down to her leadership in the area. She previously was head of security, digital security for Caribbean Bank, and we managed to persuade her to assist us with the maturing of our product. And so a lot of the work to get us to the state of, again, we're not doing any parades. We're not a place where we want to be, but we are certainly stronger than we were a year ago, and there's much more to get done. So I do want to take this opportunity to thank her for the work, and much more work to come.
Thank you for your answers, Minister. You seem to have a very good hold on the resilience needed to ensure that these threats of malware and other network threats could be mitigated by your ministry. And I thank you for having put measures in place to do that. But there's equally another threat, not from malicious software, but from malicious behaviors. And I know that through the same house, the same August chamber that you sit in, we would have passed cybersecurity protective legislation, which not only passed the local test after investigative examinations, but indeed it passed the international digital test when it was tested away from these shores. I want you to tell Barbadians the importance of having this type of legislation, how important it is to your ministry and to Barbadians in general, because oftentimes we hear about maladaptive practices in the digital sphere and practices that can destroy lives as we know it and the quality of life. And that is what is a serious, in my mind, deterrent for persons using this particular platform. So probably you can give us a date where the legislation is at and how important it is to have this type of legislation being involved in protecting this whole digital sphere. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Minister. So, as I confessed earlier, I'm very much an optimist around technology, and that optimism doesn't, however, blind me to the downsides of it. And the reality is that AI and other technological tools really advance the level of good somebody can do, and quite frankly, can advance the level of bad people can do. You can significantly scale malicious intent. You can significantly scale bad intent in a way that perhaps couldn't have happened 2-3 years ago, far less 10 years ago. And so, innocent people need protection from that, and innocent people need tools to be able to detect when that happens, as well as the state on their behalf protect them from that. So one of those powerful tools is really truthfully around legislation, right? So we were asked a question by Minister Ishmael regarding CEDA, and so I want to connect those together. That part of the ministry's mandate, as I mentioned it, initially is to drive the legislative agenda in concert with the development path that we're on. And so over the course of the next year, we have to do a significant update of critical legislative infrastructure that reflects where the country is and where it wants to be. And one of those things is going to be related to cybercrime. Now, cybercrime is a complicated thing because it's related to not just cybersecurity and digital defense and all those things. It pertains to fraud, it pertains to malactions, it pertains to a bunch of different things that get a little bit more complicated. And so I don't want to muddle the two things together. But you have our assurance that it is very much top of a priority for the ministry to bring back to Parliament for the purpose of enacting legislation that strengthens individual protection around those areas. Ms. Rosil, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about your detection tools regarding instances around fraud and all those other things from your experience as well.
Well, part of what we are currently implementing is a tool. The tool that what are the tools that we're implementing? Would be able to, how do I put it? We'll be able to look at persons' behaviors. So based on the activities that an individual would have normally done, like the time of the day, the particular store that they go to, it will be able to tell if a particular activity from an individual is anomalous, and so it would flag it as something that needs to be further investigated. So for example, if I were sitting in the office and I decided that I was going to send an email to somebody in Timbuktu, and I was not customary sending emails to that individual in Timbuktu at 2 o'clock in the morning from the office, then that transaction will be flagged as being abnormal, and we'll be able then to get it investigated further to see if it was a real transaction or if it was a fraudulent transaction. So there are a number of tools that we are going to be integrating within the ecosystem that will help us to understand and determine fraudulent behavior or just unusual behavior. However, as the minister mentioned, we would have to make sure that the legal standing is there to make some of those determinations.
Minister, can you give us a time frame when we expect to have the cybercrime legislation brought back and be enforced? So Barbadians will have this level of comfort.
Minister, you're pinning me down to a specific time, and it is certainly within the agenda of the first half of this year. I'll put it that way.
Thanks, Chair, that's all.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Central.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. And good afternoon to the Minister and all of the members of the ministry. I want to say that this is definitely an exciting time to be alive and certainly an exciting time to be a part of the government, especially because we're really and truly embracing the whole notion of really being a part of the 21st century. I'm seeing that the ministry, through its various initiatives, is guiding Barbados towards becoming a fully digital society where technology enhances the public services, drives innovation, and expands economic opportunity for our people. So I'm grateful to you for that. But as we are moving forward and modernizing this beautiful country, I want to make sure that we're not leaving persons behind and communities behind. And as I'm always the champion for the small man, especially because of the constituency that I represent, the question is, given that all Barbadians do not have equal access to reliable internet or digital tools, what steps is the ministry taking to ensure that digital transformation does not exclude the vulnerable or rural communities?
Thank you for that question. And it's one that we think a lot about. And I spoke earlier about the idea of being measured on the basis of impact in real persons' lives. Last year, for instance, one of the things that we set out to do was drive a new level of sophistication in Barbados' telecommunication infrastructure by introducing 5G technology, for instance. And so both of your major providers have rolled it out within last year. And the impact on that, of course, is that you want to be able to allow anyone, wherever they may be across the country, to always be connected and therefore not be disadvantaged about going about their day-to-day lives. We have an interesting problem in Barbados, if I get more specific, where you have this high penetration of smartphones, but the truth is that we don't really use the smartphones in a very dynamic way, quite frankly, right? So we have the devices, but we don't optimize the usage of the devices because people are effectively using it for WhatsApp or making calls. We have set about an ambitious agenda, and I'm going to let the CEO of GovTech speak a little bit more about it, where our intention is to digitize the services that government, the public, provides to people, and their interaction with a digitally enabled society means that the day-to-day things that they want to get done, whether it's certificates or whether it's license or whether it's whatever things they want to get done, they can now do at the touch of a device. Now that device has to be things that they know how to use, as well as they feel comfortable and safe to use in. And in addition to that, it has to be readily available wherever they are. So Mark, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that, and then I could just wrap up at the end.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mark Boyce, CEO of GovTech Barbados. Thank you very much for the question. As government services become more digital, it's essential that we not leave people behind. Not everyone, as you've pointed out, will have the same access to technology or the same digital skills or the same level of comfort using online services. That is why our approach at GovTech will be digital first, but not digital only. So using digital where it works best, while continuing to support people through other channels. So for some people, that means completing the service completely online. For others, it might mean being able to book an appointment online or receiving clear information about which office you have to go to and when. We're also designing services to be accessible and simple to use, those that are online, for people with disabilities, for older citizens, and for those using mobile devices that might have slower internet connections, for example. As I said, we'll continue to support in-person and assisted channels so that citizens can receive help at government offices or through staff who guide them through the process. So the goal is not simply to digitize services, but to make them easier and more accessible for everyone. And that means making the service end-to-end better, whether it occurs online or in person.
And just to expand and come back on that point, I think one of the really critical learning lessons and examples that we took from this approach is really what Rwanda has done, which is acknowledged widely as this incredibly digitally advanced small state, right? Larger than us, but it's 5 million people. So small nation. And they wanted to leapfrog their development by using advanced technologies in the way that Singapore does. So they've basically taken up the Singapore model, but have used it for their purposes. And critical to them is really the advancement of citizen experience using technology. So they have a cadre of digital ambassadors or of spaces where people can have learning sessions on how to use the tools to make their lives better. So citizens are at the center, and my human experience is at the center of the digital experience. You don't just get a platform, or you don't just get a device, or you don't just get an app, or you just don't get a process where there's not a human involved in the process. The point of it is not the vanity of saying that you have something that is technologically advanced. The point of it is how do you make the human experience better as a result of technology being used? And that's really fundamental to the ethos of our approach. So the intention is, as a society, we have advanced and done well because we've thought of the entire country. One of the things I love the most about Barbados, quite frankly, is wherever you are the island, from one point to another point, is the same bus fare, right? So no part of the country, no citizen is withheld from the ability to move around their state. Our digital transformation has to have that same ethos, and it will.
Thank you. So a follow-up to that then would be, so we're talking about the learning sessions. Would the ministry be willing and available to come into St. Michael Central then, for example, and have a teaching session, for example, to the seniors who may not know how to use the technology so that we can protect them from all the fraud and everything else that's happening online right now?
Absolutely. The minute you ask me, we'll do it, it will be done.
I'm happy to hear that. Another follow-up then would be, are there any plans, does the ministry have any plans to expand the public Wi-Fi access points or the community technology centers? Because, for example, in my constituency, we have the e-learning, now we have e-commerce, and then we have all these e-things, but the persons may not have the technology or the Wi-Fi to access them. So to ensure that we have equality, are we going to be expanding those access points?
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. I mean, the fundamental reality of where the economy is going is your ability to have access to internet is going to be paramount to your ability to do transactions. When things like BIMPay, for instance, come on board, or Pearly, or any of those digitally advanced tools that are helpful for people's lives, if you are not connected to those things, you can't do the transaction. So part of our work in science and technology and research is around the advancement of 5G technologies that makes it easier for expanding the reach of the average person to have internet, as well as secured services for internet for some secured services, but going beyond town centers and then going deeper into parish-based spots for high-quality internet services so people can access is fundamental for us.
So then my final follow-up would be, are there any plans for the Andrew Allen Community Center, which is my community center in Station Hill, in order to make that community center one of those access points, or even have public Wi-Fi?
So I can't speak to specific community center, but I am assuming when you call and you ask for your specific thing, your constituency, that will be on a list, and we'll find a way to make it happen.
I will hold you to that, Minister.
And my team heard you, so.
And we have witnesses, Minister. Thank you. I yield back, Chair.
Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Minister, I heard mention of innovative technologies going into the rural spaces, going into rural parts, and I am happy to learn that for the first time, perhaps in the history of Barbados, and I shouldn't say it's the first time, but what I should say is that traditionally, innovation have not started in the rural spaces. I think of the introduction of water to Barbados, running water, and that would have started back in 1857, the laying of the bill here in Parliament, and it took another 30 years or so before somebody found it necessary to introduce water into the rural spaces. So I know that we have traditionally not gotten anything first. So to know or to learn that a data center is coming to St. Andrew or coming to the rural parts of Scotland district, and this will be the first for Barbados, is certainly good and welcome news. But I would want to know, because I will be the first to admit that I do not know a lot, if anything at all, about data centers and the purpose of this kind of technological infrastructure. But it certainly sounds like something that would benefit the country, and it certainly sounds like something that would benefit St. Andrew or the rural spaces. I want you, Minister, or your team, to explain to me exactly why your ministry felt the need at this time to establish or to build out this infrastructure here in Barbados, as a first question.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Maybe it's my personal bias, because I'm a country boy myself, that I think one of the things that we, as small island developing states, do not think about is the development and the evolution of our rural economies. And the rural economies must reflect the beauty of the spaces and what is unique about those spaces. So If there's a moment, Mr. Hill can expound more regarding our plans for not only St. Andrew, but St. Joseph's and Lucy. The idea of thinking of specification around building up a biogas plant using the excess amounts of coconuts in St. Joseph, or thinking about the industrial space in St. Lucie, or thinking about St. Thomas, for instance, where one of the digitization center, which is under Mrs. mandate, sits, so therefore creating an innovation hub in St. Thomas, et cetera, and my friends from St. George are here, so I'm not making sure I don't leave out the things that we're going to do with St. George. But the idea is that how can we spread around even development across the entire country? So the advancement of the rural economy is paramount in our thought. I'm going to ask Chelsea Brathwaite to speak a little bit more about the specification of the data center as she leads out part of that project.
Thank you, Minister and Chair. Chelsea Brathwaite, Program Manager for Amini. So largely just to break down the idea of the data center. So as you know, for many years, much of our records are paper-based records and systems. They're stored in vaults for security, physical vaults. So the idea is that as we move now to this era of digitization, where we're digitizing everything, we need a secure place to store them. So you could think of it as a vault, but for digital assets. At present, we kind of host these things on third-party service providers, cloud services that are outside of the island. And in this case, I mean, it has two implications. First, we are paying foreign companies to store data, which has foreign exchange leaving the country. But at the same time, any data stored outside the island will be subject to laws and systems outside of Barbados for data protection. Of course, the Data Protection Commissioner could speak more on this. But to address this whole idea of data sovereignty, we want to ensure that we have this data as we digitize it stored here. So we are working, you would have heard CEO Hill earlier speak to the center that's going to be in your constituency. And the idea would be to establish that part for the country to be able to host the systems, the data there, as well as the compute and the energy infrastructure required to power the applications that are going to live on top of this system. So you could think of the data center more or less as the railway needed to kind of get us going, get all these applications, these tools and stuff needed for the government and for the citizens to benefit, but in such a way that we still maintain our sovereignty. And already we would have taken some steps to do that. So we do have a small, so to speak, server, 0.1 megawatt, coming onshore on island to kind of help with this process, where we start with some of the digitized records like cabinet and so on. So we've already started the process, but speaking largely, as CEO Hill explained, the idea is that the bigger part, the data center part, would be hosted in your constituency, and that speaks to the need for it more or less. And then of course, for your constituency, CEO Hill could speak largely to how that would bring jobs and other factors. Thank you.
Yeah, just want to end at 2 points just to wrap up, Chair, if you don't mind. One is, I mean, just the same way that as a sovereign country, you want your own airport and your own seaport, data centers are going to be part of the infrastructure that you see yourself as a sovereign state having to be able to run your digital capabilities, your economy, everything requires the compute and storage capacity for you to run your own affairs, right? So fundamentally, I think that's just the core way to look at it. And there are lots of technical terms, there are lots of things that obviously are steeped in engineering or computer science, but at the core of it is that you have functions that you need to do, so you need to own your own, just like you own your own port, your own water and water plant, your own highway, you own those things, and so you're going to need to own your own digital infrastructure. That's one. And then, you know, it's important for us to understand that not only is it to house our infrastructure, it's also for us to make commercial profit off it, right? That you can create capacity where you can on-sell to other commercial entities, Barbadian and non-Barbadian, to generate revenue from advanced infrastructure. So our vision for it is that it not only becomes something that's a cost, but quite frankly, the vision for it is that it's going to be a high-level revenue generator for the country, because we have a high level of infrastructure that our competitors and our neighboring states don't have, and they'll be using our services to be able to manage theirs as well, because we make the strategic investment at this time. So we have grand ambition around it.
basis. But we also know that that part of Barbados is seen as a pristine part of Barbados, extensive flora and fauna. So I would want to know what impact the building out of this facility would have on the flora and the fauna. And I'm asking if this was taken into consideration. I know that you'll be producing a tremendous amount of power. I see you mentioned 5 megawatts with the ability to scale up to 20 megawatts. I am sure there are persons in Barbados who, when they hear those types of terms, it makes absolute sense to them, and they know what that means. But what I want to know is the impact of this park, this technology, this infrastructure on the environment in that rural part of Barbados.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Minister, because to expand on the point made earlier regarding the focus on rural economy and rural districts, is that I think you have to be very cognizant of what a space is, and you optimize what a space is, and not try to transform it to something that is not. The distinct advantage of St. Andrew area is because of the natural habitat, its proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, which is a huge generator, for instance, of immense power that obviously is unutilized with the ocean space, right? You have this huge fall off of 1,000 feet. I think my former Minister of Environment knows this even better than I do, a fall up of space from the Atlantic shelf dropping down, which makes it highly valuable for things that such as ocean thermal energy, right? So you have distinct advantages of St. Andrew being St. Andrew, and you want it to stay that way. You're not trying to develop into something that is not. So the vision of it, and CEO Hill can go a little bit further if necessary, is really to create a park that is idealistic. It is beautiful, it is green by its nature, and you're optimizing the fact that it is green to attract business to the space. So the energy created is green. How we facilitate and we take advantage of the trees and the natural fauna is advantage that we want to keep, not something that we want to dilute. The idea of growing flowers in a space and the spaces then optimized through greenhouses specifically designed to have more flowers being grown is paramount to how we think about it. How do we manage the distance and safety from anyone's around it so there's no disturbance to life is a strong part of the consideration. How do we then connect to the Costa Edwards Primary School that's just down the road, and then the Allen School is just down the road, and you create an ecosystem where talent could then go towards work in the center, and you create hundreds of jobs potentially, are things that we are thinking about constantly. And of course, once you being obviously the representative for the area, we will be in deep consultation with you on every single component of it. But our vision is very much to advance the nature of the space and advance the advantages of what the space is without doing anything that's destructive to the experience of being there for persons who live there or persons who are visiting as a whole. CEO Hill, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Thanks, Minister. Yeah, what I want to underscore is that, parishes like St. Philip play a very important role in space exploration. St. John, the first Earth station, was based in St. John to unlock Barbados' ability to communicate via satellite. So St. Andrew is this, particularly around Greenland, is this in this zone that really allows for high levels of security and at the same time high levels of environmental resilience. So as the minister pointed out, pretty much we're using the Greenland facility that was earmarked primarily for some other purpose, and we're repurposing it for data, right? So therefore, there's an enhancement in the use of that facility, which is currently there. So all that power that we spoke about will be located at that site, and the site is now repurposed now for data and digital development. Now, what we have is an arrangement also with a company out of Kenya, where they will be off taking the cut flowers that is growing under the solar panels as an additional export into the European market. So we're not just pairing it with just hardcore data and digital infrastructure. It is merging digital and biological opportunities so that the folks in St. John can benefit significantly. So we're talking about anthuriums, ginger lilies, roses, those types of things will be grown under the solar panels so that we're creating jobs in the community and at the same time providing Barbados with the AI infrastructure that it needs to move forward. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm glad you mentioned jobs because that was going to be my very next question, but I think Minister alluded to it, and then you also made mention of it. I know that you say you've started the work, you've started the initial work, because I imagine this would a project that would be built up over a period of time. Now, this is exciting news, and I would want to know if there's anything else in the pipeline similar to this that's going to come into any part of the rural spaces, certainly any part of St. Andrew that you would want to share. I know, in terms of the plans for the ministry for further development of that area.
So, not to, and I live in your constituency too, so, you know, but not to only focus on St. Andrew. I think it's important for CEO Hill to share some of our thoughts in general regarding the urban economy development and other areas. But as I alluded to before, you have a reality of the country being a small one, right? So 166 square miles, where there are distinct advantages that are geographic, that you can optimize something that is new to the space, but highly valuable. And that's why I really want to stress on, for instance, the power of thinking about the place that once we drive past, and my 14-year-old daughter always says, you know, when we go to St. Andrew, the sea doesn't cool out, right? There's this incredible amount of energy being generated there, but we're not optimizing it, right? So how do we optimize it in a way that certainly doesn't take away from the beauty of the space, but that power then could be used to develop Barbadians and make Barbadian lives better? Those are the things that we want to figure out. In the case of St. Joseph, for instance, Mark, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more, or what you're thinking regarding that.
So in St. Joseph case, we have been sponsored by the Indian government the sum of $1 million for coconut processing to HACCP certified standards. So the equipment comes in to make sure that the water that is produced in Barbados is to HACCP standards, and they're providing all the equipment. Now, the best place to locate that is to decentralize into the East Corridor around St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas, and Scotland District, because that is where the coconuts are produced. So from a logistics standpoint, if we move coconuts from the country, from that East Corridor, to move it to the south at Newton, to then move it back to the East Corridor for processing, you're pretty much wasting logistics space. So locating now the coconut hub in the St. Joseph Belt, where the coconut nursery is located, where the coconuts are being grown, allows us now to build out that industry and create that corridor around alternative bioeconomy activities, additional biohydrogen opportunities, additional renewable energy opportunities, and pretty much another green zone within that, around the coconut shells. Now, the equipment that coming in is not only for water, but we're actually taking the shells, defibering the shells, and making fabrics, plant pots. So again, these are new jobs for persons in St. Joseph. We've been doing some tours. We saw the youngsters picking coconuts and interacting with them. So we know that there's that capacity for significant levels of jobs in that St. Joseph Belt around the coconut industry. And the coconut tree is a very, very important tree in Barbados. It's resilient. It has multiple purposes, from water to food to oil, through to fabrics, through to furniture. And we therefore need to capitalize around this hub, around this center, and build now in St. Joseph, St. John, the Scotland District area, to create more jobs again. Minister, thanks.
Chair, to you.
Oh, thank you, Minister. I actually have another question, but when you said standards, I was
Honourable
trying to...
member, you have the other question in the second round. Thank
I
you.
was making that point that I suspect that it will constitute a second
That's
question.
okay, honourable member.
And not a follow-on question.
That's okay.
But thank you, I yield back.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Wait a second.
The question is, I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Has reported progress and request leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:35 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:35 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:35 p.m.